Perfect. I'll start sharing. Can you see my screen?
Yeah,
I'm sharing. Just want to see if I'm sharing the right screen. That's the document understanding framework one, right? We
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Okay,
You're good.
perfect. Awesome. All right, guys. Great session. We know great introduction to document understanding. So, what we are trying to understand in today's session is what truly document understanding is and the art of the possible on how you can implement document understanding is. So, we talked about what DU is, what are our extraction capabilities in terms of document types. DU has the capability of extracting structured, semi-structured, unstructured documents. And the way to do it, you have many different ways you can do extraction. You can do either rule-based, hybrid, or machine learning. So, that being said, what I'm going to do now is a more deeper dive into how you implement document understanding from a developer or integration standpoint. Right. So what you're seeing on the screen is something that we call the document understanding framework. Now, what this entails is that this is a structure on how you extract or classify or extract and classify document types within the UiPath Document Understanding Framework. So over here, you see something called load taxonomy, digitization, classify, extract, export, and then at the bottom you say validate and retraining with human there. So let me go into a little bit of a depth and explain what these are. So when you start a document understanding framework, first of all, we have something called taxonomy, where we define taxonomy over here, right? So let me go to the next slide that needs a little of, sorry, go back here. So what taxonomy does is you typically define the document and the fields that you're going to extract. So that way the model would understand what type of fields you're going to extract, right? And digitization. If you remember in Reno's previous slide where he explained how document understanding was components of OCR and artificial intelligence, when it comes to digitization, what we use OCR, which is called optical character recognition. Why? To transform the document into machine readable or language readable context, right? So it would either um, do some kind of name entities for the context and just identify like metadata of that document for further processing. So that's what happens in the document understanding digitization step. And next, there is a component called classification. Now, the art of the possible is you do not have to work with one set of document types within a DU framework. You can process multiple document types. And in the classification stage, what happens is the classification model will be identifying what the document type you're trying to process. So let's say, for example, you have a PDF that comes with invoices, purchase orders, receipts, checks, non-related POs, memos, all of that. And what you have to do is you have to split and classify what each page is. That's where classification comes into play. Classification, you can use different classification models to understand what the document type is. And over here, you can see you can either use an ML model that you can retrain, or you can do something called intelligent keyword classifier, which classifies the document based on unique keywords. Now, let's say, for example, if you're using a check, right? You are always going to have unique words that always pertain to a check. So that's how keyword classifiers work. So whenever you use the keywords, it would identify those unique keywords and classify them. Over here at the bottom, you'd see the validation, classification, and retraining. So whenever you do in practice, you have the option of involving human in the loop. Now, human in the loop is called where you can have somebody to manually review and validate it, and then you can have the option of retraining that classification model. So this is the capability that we are actually trying to discuss here. So now let's regroup, right? Like we classified the documents, we identified what document type it was. Now the next step would be extraction. Now, extraction is where you actually put in the work and you identify what are the fields you want to extract. If you have tables, what are the tables you want to extract, and get all of those data extracted. And the way you do it is you can either have either rule-based, like a regex extractor, intelligent form, or even a machine learning extractor where you can customize and train within AI Center in UiPath. Or you can use out-of-the-box machine learning models that are available within UiPath to extract the data points that you need. For example, UiPath already has an out-of-the-box receipts extractor, invoices, purchase check. So then you can go in and use those out-of-the-box machine learning models. Now, if you have a customized document that is very unique, let's say like labels or incoming waybills, which you really need to customize the fields. You can use out of the box document understanding ML model to customize and create your own machine learning model. Now, the human in the loop concept would be the same as classification, where you can say, for example, once you train the model, you have it say the model is working 80% with an 80% confidence score. That means 8 out of 10 times it would extract accurately. And then the 2 out of 10 times you would need a human in the loop to intervene and validate. So that's where, again, you can see this where you validate data and retrain within the human. And now this four steps are essentially the key and the top parts of document understanding. So once that happens and once the extraction is complete, then you can add either you can export as is, you can add business implementations, or you can, export and do another RPA based ERP, some kind of processing. But this would be the heavy lift of a document understanding framework, right? So a little bit deeper into the document understanding architecture, you can see, let's see. You can see the things that we talked about here. Let's see. Okay, perfect. You can see the purchase orders coming in as a structured document. And then you would go in, you would go through that whole document understanding process of, you have the taxonomy, you read documents in OCR, you split and classify. You can have multiple extraction methods, either, form extractor, um, ML models, and you can have different extractor methodologies for different document types. And then once you do that, you have the post-processing, business rules, and then you go into automated data entry, right? Okay. Before I go into the next slide, I'm going to take a bunch of questions because I saw a couple of questions coming in. We know you have applied to them as well. So Sahil, you have asked what types of problems does DU solve? Structure, semi-structured, or part unstructured. So document understanding is actually made for all three document types, structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. So in practice, in practical projects, it works really well for structured and semi-structured. Unstructured documents are more complicated than structured and semi-structured. So when you think about unstructured, think about things like legal contracts or, forms that really don't have a proper layout. So Another thing is that's where IXP comes into play, and that's where IXP works better in unstructured, and that's why UiPath has implemented IXP, is because IXP is developed specifically to work with highly complex unstructured documents. And over the next session that Bino and the New York community is going to have, you're going to dive in deep into the unstructured or IXP experience, right? The next one is that's about it. Okay, cool. Right. So to give you a little bit of a highlight again is load taxonomy. You can see how it looks like on the right side, right? You define your document type, and by the right side, what you're seeing is what you would see in UiPath Studio. Now you create a document understanding framework, and you're going into the step of defining your taxonomy. This is where you're going to see how you define it. You can see you can either have semi-structured documents, structured documents. You don't have to have one document. You can have many document types. You can see here there are two forms of IRS forms, three forms of generalized ML models. You have invoices, receipts, purchase orders. All of these can be extracted within one document understanding framework. So if you have a PDF that comes with all of these document types, great. You can create one taxonomy to handle all of these use cases. And when you go into the right side, you can see that the fields, you can name those fields and categorize them as well. And another bonus thing is you can actually define how these fields need to be. It can either be a string where it can be either a combination of numbers and letters. You can define it as letters, numbers, and whatnot, right? And then the digitization, OCR, right? Optical character recognition. This is where I was talking about the metadata of the documents that needs to be gets digitized with OCR. Now, a little bit of OCR is that UiPath has a standard OCR called UiPath Document Understanding OCR. I think that's the terminology there. So what that is, it's UiPath's own OCR. Now, everybody has their own OCR engines. Azure has one, Google, Amazon has Textract. But UiPath, when you build a UiPath model, we by default we use UiPath. But that does not limit you from using third-party OCRs. So if you want to explore and if you have a project that you need to, for some reason, you need to use Azure's capabilities, you still can connect a third-party hyperscaler within the UiPath document understanding framework, which I think it's really nice. So essentially, what happens in digitization is it detects all the words, coordinates, X and Y coordinates, just to see the positioning of the words. Um, Handwritten text, you can identify what's a handwritten text, what's a native text. Another beautiful thing is you can identify the document is native or scanned. Those can be done. You can identify signatures, check boxes, QR codes. Um, and the output would be two types. You'll get a raw text and the metadata about the text. So these would be essentially the capability of digitization and OCR, right? And then classification. We talked about the classifiers, intelligence keywords, and the keyword classifier. But essentially, what it does is it's classifying based on those uniquely identifiable keywords within a document. Now, a little bit on document classifier and ML classifier. I would use these for really complex classification issues. In practice, even for complex semi-structured documents, you can get away with using intelligent keyword classifier. Now, this would be essential if you're considering like, AI unit cost or any kind of cost constraints, and you want to use classifier just to be thoughtful, mindful about the cost, I would use intelligent keyword classifier first. A lot I see within the developer community is that whenever they see something that's complex, they would automatically go like, okay, we need an ML model for everything. We need an ML model to extract, we need an ML model to classify. But I would say no, try first using intelligence keyword classifier because intelligence keyword classifier has proven success in a lot of complex solutions. If it doesn't, the way IKC works is you need to train a whole bunch of documents and then it would intelligently identify the document type. So if you ever struggle trying to figure out what classifier you need to use, I would always recommend please use the intelligence keyword classifier first and see if you can gain success out of it. If it's a hard no, then go to document classifier and ML classifier because using a document classifier and ML classifier means you have to train the classifier again, which is going to be a lot of time and effort from a developer standpoint. But this is something I see all the time that happens in the developer community. There's a lot of ambiguity on what classifier to use. So hope that helps if somebody is struggling to identify the classification approaches, right? And extraction. Again, we talked about all of these extractions that are happening, but one thing that I want to point out is if you're a citizen developer, right, you have the option of using Forms AI and semi-structured AI. Now, AI Center would be just essentially a deeper semi-structured AI, which is more pertained to an RPA developer or a DU developer. But you have these capabilities to use within the UiPath Studio family. And if you're a RP or DU developer and want to use more into customized machine learning models, you can use semi-structured AI, and that's essentially AI Center, but in a smaller form, right? All right. So another view on how validation looks like. Now over here, you can see the classification task. So this is essentially reminder. This happens if something fails or something is not captured well or something falls below the threshold that you put in. For example, you train a model, it works 80% well, which means 8 out of 10 documents get captured well. 2 out of 10 documents, you need to do the validation. So over here, you would see this document, it failed because either it didn't classify or it was fallen below that threshold, right? So here, what you can do is you can identify the document and you can this there will be a drop down over here. You can select what document type it pertains and then save it. So this essentially would be the human in the loop for the classification task. Now, when we come into extraction, again, you can see on the left-hand side, there are fields and then there are highlighted fields on the right side. So the right side would be your document and you can see, the names over here, the date has been captured, but some have not been extracted. And this is where you as a human can make those changes. And this is available in UiPath's Action Center, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the generative AI capabilities in data labeling. So what you're seeing right now is AI Center, right? So a little fact about Gen AI is that generative AI comes in many, many different offerings within the UiPath family, right? You can use Gen AI extractor within Studio, or you can, for when you're doing a custom machine learning model, you can use the standard machine learning features within UiPath, or you can have a generative predict, which means that UiPath will use Gen AI capabilities to intelligently identify the fields and values. So in this way, you don't have to manually label these fields when you are doing data labeling. You can use generative AI to identify those fields intelligently. Now, again, this is a very high level explanation on generative AI, just because today's session did not focus on generative AI. We are thinking about the semi-structured documents with document understanding. But if anyone is more interested in doing a deeper dive into Gen AI and exploring their capabilities within UiPath, please feel free to add it in the chat so we really know what the community wants and we can identify what sessions need to be in the future, right? But as far as generative AI goes, in machine learning training, you have that capability of intelligently identifying fields within data labeling, which saves time as a developer, essentially. But one thing I want to say is this can be a hit or miss based on what type of document that you're trying to extract. If you're trying to extract very well-known documents, and this goes for all languages that are compatible with UiPath, by the way. You can use generative extraction, generative, yeah, generative predict to predict fields. But if you have a complex document that is, let's say it's scanned, it's handwritten, and it comes in many different other languages, your best bet would be to use UiPath's predict, which is a combination of your ML model and generative extraction. The reason I'm saying that is because when you use the combination, it actually uses the predictions that you have made in the past, which means the labeling that you have made in the past, which would yield in a better result. So again, the generative predict doesn't work well in all cases. It depends on the document and the type that you are using, right? Okay. All right. Best practices. Now, as a developer, I've seen this be the most challenging part all the time when it comes to best practices, right? Because whenever you get onto a project, you get asked what do you need as a developer to be successful in this project? And if you are starting a project, either as a developer, a BA, anybody involved in the delivery team, something that's very, very important and doing probably the number one thing is identify your data. Know where your data is, know if your data is enough, and go check your data and see if that is the right data that you need. For example, if you're working with a customer and you are starting on a project, let's take an example. We're starting on an invoices project, right? Let's say they have two languages, English and Spanish, and it comes in multiple layouts. So as a developer or as a member of a delivery team, it's always important for you to identify, what are the data types? Example, are we only seeing invoices in a document? Or are we seeing a PDF that has XYZ documents and invoices? So if that is the case, then you need to classify, right? So asking all of those questions early on is very important because when who you're talking to can either be technical or non-technical. And most cases, they would be non-technical business folks. So they wouldn't really know what the documents are, or they wouldn't really care because from their perspective, it would be like, hey, we're giving them a bunch of documents, they're going to figure this out. And we're the people who are trying to figure it out, right? So a really good practice is to ask how the documents are in real life. Are they only going to be invoices or are they going to be PDFs that have invoices and other documents? Because that way you'll have to classify and you have to do a bunch of cut and chops if needed. And the second thing that you need to do is identify the layouts. So, how many layouts are we talking about if it's invoices? Because an invoice can be with many different layouts. And I remember Reno was talking about it, right? In a document, let's say the address, it can be either in the top right, the bottom right, or the top left, or it can be wherever. So whenever these layouts changed, it would be considered as a different layout. So try to identify how many layouts there are. Now, if you're doing a really big project, sometimes the customer will not even know how many layouts there are. They'll be like, we don't know. There can be thousand, there can be like a lot of layouts. And always try to identify, at least at a ballpark level, how many layouts and document types there are. And if it's really hard for you or challenging to get that data, at least try to get 70% of samples that you would see in real life because you want to push this model into production. And when you're in production, you don't want the model to see data that it has never seen before. And then the customer will be like, hey, when you trained a machine learning model, you had an 80% pass through, and now we're in production and the pass through has fallen into 50%. That's because your model doesn't have representative data. So the best practice in document understanding early on is to identify your data structures, your document types, and actually collect the right data to train. So make sure that it's your priority, right? And then focus on AHD reduction, not just accuracy or straight through processing. That's right. You have to focus on, getting a fully compatible extraction and not just straight through processing. Because even if you say, hey, your straight through processing is 80%, you need to think about how a field level extraction occurs. Sometimes, and I'll give this as an example, this would make much more sense. When you have tables, tables become the most challenging thing to extract and train as compared to fields. So, you can have a really good straight through processing if you have a lot of fields and just one table, but fine tuning that table to be as good as it can be needs to be important because if the table fails, it would mean essentially a lot of your data capturing would fail, right? Set the right classification and extraction approach. We talked about that, right? It's important to identify what classifier, what extraction you use, and the approach. By the approach, we're talking about you can either use hybrid, you can use native, you can use machine learning, standalone. So it's up to you to really identify what the right strategy is, right? Machine learning models versus Gen AI extractions. Choose wisely. So the reason why we're saying this is the downside of generative AI extraction is that we don't have a barrier to, check for confidence levels as opposed to machine learning models. Now, in UiPath, when you build a machine learning model, you get a lot of data that comes with it. Like you get the pass through, you get the confidence score, and you can fine tune it. And it's always consistent. So when you use a generative AI model, you probably have noticed this before, and if you haven't used any Gen AI models, if you use, for example, ChatGPT, the answer is not always stable. It's not always the same answer that you get. So this could be a reflection in Gen AI extraction as well. The stability will not always be the same output. And you don't get a confidence score. So you won't be able to visualize or, analyze how successful your extraction is. But there are, positive outlooks on Gen AI extraction as well. If you have, a more also for unstructured documents. If you don't have the time and materials to build a model, Gen AI extraction will be really good in understanding context. So you really need to identify the pros and the cons of using either Gen AI or machine learning models, right? Uh, Train with quality data. That's a really important one as well. So we talked about, you need to understand what the document types are and you need to make a representative sample. For example, if you have, let's say, 10 different samples, you need to make sure that all 10 are represented with the same weight. So if you're creating a machine learning model, make sure that you have the same weight in the document samples. Because sometimes if you train a model, say you put 100 documents and you put like 20 of the same types and then the rest are like three or four, that would make an unbalanced weighted model, right? Which would result in an unbalanced model, which we do not want. The basis of creating a machine learning model is we always want it to be representative and properly weighted, that would reflect the actual production outputs, right? And then continuous improvement. So UiPath machine learning models have this thing called continuous improvement, which means you can train the model over time, either manually or you can trigger a continuous loop to automatically train the model. Now, again, this has pros and cons as well. Training the model is not always a good thing. It depends on the situation. Now, if you have a machine learning model that has, say, 75%, but you can increase it to 85%. But if you're pushing it into, testing or whatever, and you want to train it over time, you can train it over time. But let's say on the flip side, you have a model that's already 85%. You've trained it enough and it's probably doing the best it can do. But over time, if you're going to train it, the model either can get skewed, which we call overfitted, where you just train a lot of data, and after a while, the model has way too much data that it really doesn't need. So it really doesn't do good in performance. From 85, it would actually drop down to 80%, because of the overfitting. So that in that sense, you shouldn't retrain it. So again, it depends on the situation, and probably the key of this is you as a delivery person need to identify what, where, and how to use these UiPath components, right? And then a nice thing is tracking KPIs with UiPath Insights. So you can track, with Insights, you can track the straight-through processing, the processing times, and all those fun stuff that businesses would love to see how successful your model is. Right. So I talked a lot about UiPath's document understanding and how to do it. If you were somebody who already knows DU, that's great. And if you were just coming into DU, I hope this was not information overload for you, but this is something that's important because we see a lot of success and failures in the document understanding space because they don't implement simple best practices like this, right? So that being said, that's all I had today for you guys on how to extract documents, unstructured documents with document understanding. And now let's check on the questions. Hey, Adam, thanks a lot for joining the call. See you soon. And let's see, Fernando, thanks a lot for letting me know you'll be interested in Gen AI capabilities of UiPath. Diana, maybe over some time, let me get back to you and we'll set up a session where we explore a deeper cadence of generative AI capabilities.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank
Cool.
you.
All right, thanks, guys. Any other questions? We'll give open floor for about 2, 3 minutes and see how everybody feels. And if anyone has any other questions, please feel to unmute yourself or add it in the chat.
Yeah, and please, just a quick reminder that we put in chat the second session, so please make sure you guys sign up for that.
Hey, Fernando, I'm reading your question right now where you mentioned that we can train the model over time, either manually or in some other way. I didn't catch the other way. Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm talking about is a machine learning model, right? So let's say you do an open out of the box machine learning model. Over time, what I say manually is you can go in and you can hit the retrain button after you add a bunch of data and label them, right? That is what I would say you can manually train. So you go in, you can dump all your data, label them or predict them, and then you do the retraining cycle. You get a good model and you push it into your ML skill. That would be a manual effort. What you can do is you can schedule the model to train automatically, I think it's called machine learning trainer in Studio, where you say you have a ML skill or a machine learning model that's already in production and it's extracting all of those documents. So, for example, if the documents go into human in the loop and you label them and you validate them, you can automatically trigger those labeled documents to be added back to the ML model and you can schedule a trainer. So, for example, if it's in production, you are having a no-touch model, you have human in the loop, and then you're going to say, hey, every 2 weeks, the model is automatically going to retrain with the data that the human in the loop validated. So every 2 weeks, the model would automatically retrain and publish. But this gets really, really tricky because sometimes this is where the model can overfit, and then after a while, the model doesn't work at all. So I don't recommend it because it's always good to have control of a machine learning model. And again, it depends on the situation. Some situations it can be good. So those are the two differences where you manually retrain a model or you automatically trigger a retrain of the model. Does that make sense? Yeah, so the thing we don't do the demo is that a demo can take a lot of time to go through those different components, right? So if you want, we can create another session, maybe a working session to understand how these different components are within AI Center. And maybe that would help you just to see how you can work within AI Center, create a model, retrain, and what are we talking about. But the reason that we didn't do it is it's probably going to take another hour to show you how these things are done within AI Center. Yeah.
Yeah, that
That-
is a good takeaway as well. We can have like maybe like in the next year, a few more series lined up,
yeah.
Yeah,
like a
two more
hands-on.
series.
Yeah, we just got two more ideas. But thank you so much, guys. This means that there is curiosity for document understanding, and definitely Vino and I will be excited to do maybe a working session and dive into those Gen AI capabilities. Don't forget, next week is going to be very exciting. We're going to have IXP. And just learn how IXP is and IXP's capabilities. I think that's great too when you dive into unstructured documents. So don't forget to sign up into that. Well, thanks, Kendra. Thank you. Thank you, Fernando. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Papas. All right, Diana, I'm gonna hand the floor over to you. I think we are good.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I'll have the recording available later today or early tomorrow. From my point of view, again, you can register for the next session, and we'll see you next week. And then, Vino, do you have anything you want to wrap up with?
so yeah, thanks all. It was a very good participation, and I hope that this series, I mean, this session was very much helpful. And also, don't forget to sign up for the New York chapter. We'll be having many more, and obviously we got a couple of ideas now, but we have many more in our pipeline. So again, yeah, thanks all, and especially thanks Sharon for joining us today and sharing us with real practical insights. This is something which we cannot get outside in like a in like a website or something. This is like very much practical insight, and I really appreciate all the insights that you have shared with us.
Absolutely, Vino. Thank you so much. It was such a fun session being in the New York chapter. I like the timeline because I live 3 hours away. I was like, oh, 12 p.m. means 9 a.m. at New York, sorry, LA. So that was a good reminder for me to in the morning too. So thanks for having me here.
Yeah,
Cool.
Thank you, Sharon and Vino Levan. And we'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
Yep. Take
yeah,
care.
thanks all. Take care. Bye.